Alright, so welcome to my second podcast about Maus by Art Spiegelman. To start with a brief plot summary, Maus is about a man's relationship with his father, who is a Holocaust survivor, and how he learns about his father's past and how they deal with the guilt that they have due to this past. The book is structured to follow two different types of time periods. The first one is about Vladek's past, and he's basically retelling his story to his son throughout the book, and you'll see how quick-wittedly he avoids death in many situations, and what his relationship with his wife Anja was like. The second part of the book is based on the present, which focuses more on Artie's and Vladek's relationship. Since Anja had passed, Vladek got a second wife, whom he constantly bickers with about money, and he also develops some heart problems. Artie is seen trying to deal with his father's cheapness and do-it-yourself kind of attitude, and also trying to figure out how he can deal with his own guilt while his father deals with his other type of guilt. Throughout the book, you can see both characters trying to understand the other and deal with this part of their life that makes them feel so guilty in different ways. To name a few great things about Maus, I'd have to start off talking about the story flow. The book seamlessly switches from past to present with a fast progression that keeps you reading. Is mainly pulled by the words that the characters use in their dialogue, and not so much the art, because while the art is phenomenal and it really helps you imagine what it was like and the many places that were drawn, it also has some faults. While the art was really amazing, I also thought that the structure of each page was kind of the same, and usually with graphic novels they focus more on the images than the words, but it was kind of the opposite for Maus. So it wasn't very dynamic, and you couldn't really pull you down the page with the images as well as it could with words. I think that the text handles the topic of the Holocaust with pretty good sense of humor to start off. Not really about the Holocaust itself, but more so about the relationship between Artie and his father. They have a lot of bickering, and it lightens the mood and brings a little light fluff that you need to balance a story from being very sad and gross to also being nice and funny. I also think that it handles the Holocaust well with its perspective on what had happened. It's basically coming from a retelling of a story of someone who experienced the Holocaust themselves, so it definitely makes you feel that you're hearing it from a place of truth for the most part. The problem that arises is that Artie did not go through the Holocaust. He's retelling his father's story, so this doesn't allow him to feel the same feelings about experiences that his father had, and this can cause even the slightest inaccuracies throughout the book, but I think the author himself knows this to be true, because in the book he exemplifies being very distraught about this topic and how to deal with it. And that leads me to talk about, our greatest piece of reference to any given situation is our own experiences and feelings. Therefore, it limits us from understanding someone going through chemotherapy or being a refugee in a new country, although many of us share the same underlying emotions, and that's why we are able to empathize with one another. We are all part of Artie and Vladek's relationship, taking on different roles of guilt. Being a suburban, middle-class teenage girl, I really don't have any immediate dangers or prejudices that are threatening my life. I relate to Artie because I struggle critically thinking about what my grandparents went through during the Great Depression, and therefore, it leads me to feel inferior to their suffering because I have it pretty easy. But that doesn't devalidate my sufferings. It's just a different type of suffering that I'm gone through, a different type of guilt. And while I can imagine that my grandma also holds these many sorrows and guilty feelings, sometimes she acts like the weight of the world's on her shoulders. To me, she represents more of Vladek's perspective. The idea that there's survivor's guilt, that many of his friends and family did not make it, and he has a feeling that, like, why did I make it? Why did I have to live? As opposed to them. It's not like my life isn't any more worth than theirs. I guess it just comes down to luck, is what they tried to say in the book. A lot of luck. I really recommend that you read the second part of Maus, because it just goes way more in depth about their relationship, and you actually get to see Vladek go through Auschwitz, and it's a lot more, I guess you could say violent or gruesome, but it's also a lot more meaningful. I mean, I'm only halfway through, so we'll see. Alright, so since I'm sick of hearing my own voice, I'm gonna change things up a bit and talk to my friend Cameron. She previously read Maus, and I want to hear what her thoughts on the book were. What did you like about reading Maus?
I really liked reading Maus because it provides, like, an interesting perspective on the Holocaust, and I've read, like, a ton of Holocaust books. Like, being Jewish, my mom, like, has given me a lot, but when I read Maus, I read it this year, and it was interesting, the relationship between the son and the father, and how the characters were portrayed as animals. It really, I don't know, seeing a graphic novel is really different than reading it, and it gave me a really good perspective. What this character, what the dad had to go through, and how you see him in the future, and how he's changed because of what he had to go through, and how the son's learning that about him and becoming more accepting is really interesting. And yeah, I like the book a lot.
So basically you think, like, it accurately, like, represents, like, what happened during the Holocaust?
Well, yes and no. I mean, because it's not a first-hand account, it's from the son's perspective. And of course he wasn't there, and he's drawing it only from what his father has said. But I think he does a really good job. And so it's not like a first-hand account, but you really feel like you're there, and he puts you in it, and in a way that Holocaust survivors can't really do as well, because it's from a different perspective. And
right.
Yeah.
So, like, basically the author's bias is what has happened to his father, and then also because he's, like, kind of resents his father in some ways, and, like, how, like, they treat, like, I think he is basically trying to show how, like, their parents, like, who've gone through the Holocaust, treat their kids, like, kind of like, oh, like, you didn't go through all of this, so you're not, like, really suffering anything.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And basically, do you think that this should be included in, like, the Holocaust curriculum?
Yes, for sure. I definitely think so. As I said, it's really a good account, and it has all these phases of how a Jew, the beginning of the Holocaust, to them hiding, and then to them actually going to Auschwitz. And what's cool is it shows you the aftermath of how this Holocaust affected these people, which not many books show how it relates to, like, modern day. And what's cool about Maus is it puts it into real life.
Yeah. I also think it's just better for students because it's a comic book.
Right.
So I think it's more engaging than a book for a lot of kids who, like, aren't really into reading. I think it would get them interested in the topic.
So it's, like, great for high schoolers.
Okay, thanks, Cameron.
Thanks, Lana.
Okay, so thank you for listening to my podcast. Have a good day.